Hello and welcome to Fact Hunters. Today we're answering one of the more unusual questions that we've come across. What would happen if humans disappeared? Now, inevitably humans will die out. Our natural span on Earth will come to an end, by which time another dominant species will have taken our place. Or the Earth will have been destroyed, zombies will have eaten us, or Skynet will have become self-aware and will be rounded up in prison camps. But what we're covering today is what would happen if we vanished in a split second. Firstly, cars, planes, buses, trains, all form of transport would continue moving until they hit something solid. But instead of the shouts and screams and the noise of sirens approaching, there would be nothing but the sound of dripping fuel, maybe the crackling of flames. Planes would begin to drop from the sky, maybe continuing for hours as their autopilots and flight systems keep them airborne until the fuel finally cuts out, sending them plummeting earthwards. Trains would likely collide, concertinaing across the tracks and derailing others. Smoke would rise from cities and towns, clearly visible in the daylight, as the sounds of our infrastructure literally crashing down began to die out. As night fell, so too would our lights. Automated systems would continue for some hours, but the lights in your home would stay dark. Office lights would remain off and neon advertising would flicker and die. As power plants began to run out of fuel, the streetlights would begin to dim, perhaps street by street, until entire cities are blacked out. As the sun rose the next day, it would struggle to permeate the smog formed by the fires. Nuclear reactor cooling systems would have begun to fail by now, with their systems bursting into flame and releasing deadly clouds of radiation. After about a week, as the fires burned themselves out and the last lights died, nature would begin to reclaim the earth. Weeds would begin to spread, seeds carried by the wind would settle across even towns and cities, with vegetation beginning to spring up on sidewalks and roads. Any pets unfortunate enough to be locked indoors would have starved to death. Domesticated animals like cows and sheep would also starve to death as their pastures were consumed. Packs of dogs would band together, forming natural packs with hierarchies. Weaker breeds would begin to starve as they failed to hunt prey. Cows and sheep that escaped from their pastures would fall prey to the packs as sheer numbers overwhelmed them. Underground tunnels and rail networks would flood as their pumping systems began to fail. The floodwater would rise in many places, particularly as debris formed blockages. Many streets would become rivers, the fast-moving water beginning the first stages of erosion on the buildings it passed. Cockroaches would also die out around this time, as they cannot survive without artificial heat. Cities would become toxic as sewers backed up and the collective dirt of humanity began to be washed away. After 6 months, the chaos would have died down. The radiation would be fading and the fires would have burned themselves out. The weaker animals would have been hunted and eaten by the stronger predators. An imbalance would have formed, with cats and dogs dominating the predator environment and eating all the natural prey sources. Animals like rabbits, deer and raccoons would now be endangered species. After about a year, the sky will begin to shed its satellites as their fuel supplies dwindle and their orbits disintegrate. They'll crash to Earth and form craters, but the overall damage will be quite minimal. After a couple of cold winters without artificial heat, the freeze-thaw process will crack concrete and rust metal. Pipes will burst, helping to weaken the concrete further, and the first large buildings will collapse. In cities, skyscrapers may begin to tumble. After 20 years, vegetation will completely cover cities. Roads will be covered in moss, only discernible through the gaps they form between trees and long grasses. Cities like London in the UK will return to swampland as they were in the pre-Roman times. Bridges will erode and collapse into rivers, and only the tallest and strongest buildings will still stand. Endangered animals like elephants and rhinos will be dominant again within a century, without the trade in ivory and horns. Vast herds of American bison will again stretch across the continent. After a century, dams will begin to collapse. Water will be the biggest eroder, washing away cities and roads into rivers, where the rubble will be pounded into dust and swept into the oceans. This will clear space for forests, which in 500 years will have reclaimed their dominance across the planet. After 20,000 years, there will be very little trace of us. Future scientists, if they exist, will still be able to find evidence in our fossils. Plastic and rubber will be preserved in startling quality next to our bones, and we'll have them scratching their heads. Interestingly, one thing that will still remain is electromagnetic radiation. The uncountable transmissions and signals we've beamed into space will still exist, travelling through the cosmos, and still be able to be picked up, leaving evidence of what we sound like and the technology we've created. Other landmarks, such as Mount Rushmore in the US, will stand for a staggering 7 million years. In fact, anything we've created from stone will likely be preserved. The pyramids will still be standing firm, as they have for thousands of years already, and the Great Wall of China will still exist in places. But in 25,000 years, as the climate settled, the Earth would likely face another ice age. Anything that still remained would be buried beneath the ice sheets, likely for thousands more years. So that's the end of the video. Let us know in the comment section below what you thought of this. If you liked it, then make sure you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to Fact Hunters today. We release new videos 3 times a week. Thanks for watching,